Hey, folks. Hey, welcome back to the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. As always, we want to put people on that embody the spirit of the kangaroo and their leadership traits, and that's about moving forward, always moving forward, because kangaroos physically can't move backwards. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Olivia Atkin. Olivia's got an amazing story. She's got some amazing work, and she's got some amazing things to tell us. And as she said, I'm here to roll with the flow. So we're going to see where this takes us. But Olivia, tell us a little bit about you, what your passion is, and then let's talk to some people about doing things and achieving success.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on. And I would say the overall theme of what I do and why I do it is to help people use their voice to make an impact, whether that's through leadership, through podcasting, through anything I do. It's how can we use our voice to make that positive impact and help others feel like they're not alone while learning and advancing and achieving those success goals they have. So my business, Achieving Success LLC, I obviously have my podcast called Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. That is a top 5% most listened to podcast globally, is in 40 countries and all 7 continents. That I talk about achieving success, and I purposely use that word achieve because success changes and it should change. And just like a kangaroo, you're always moving forward in life, in your tasks, in whatever it might be. And then I also do podcast consulting. So I help people get on the right podcast, advance their podcast, start and grow and take workflow off of them so that they can have a podcast that really allows them to use their voice to make an impact without having to necessarily do everything themselves if they don't have the time, whatever it might be.
So, a couple interesting things there, but I guess the first thing that I want to ask you is, if you want to be successful or achieve success, you have to have a definition of success, and then successful. Once you have defined what success looks like, then you have to know what a finish line looks like, at least for whatever goal you've set. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and I love how you brought this up because on my podcast, after every intro, the very first question I always ask is, what does success mean and look like to you? And I very rarely get asked it. So I always enjoy when a host asks me this question because I'm like, secretly, I ask this, not much secretly, but I always ask this question to other people. And for me, achieving success very much looks like helping others use their voice and helping others in different ways, right? So as long as I've helped make an impact in someone's life somehow in a day, then I've been successful that day. And that's how I measure success. So, am I getting on a call with a client or on a podcast or with a prospective client and helping them realize the power of their voice if they're not necessarily confident in that or unsure about how, like, is their story really worth telling? How could they do it, right? All those things. I've helped someone that day if I bring their voice and recognition to their experiences that they've had. Have I said, I hear you and I validate those experiences that you went through, right? I work with a lot of people who are current or former military. So their experiences and transitions are very valid, but it's not something that every civilian goes through or understands. You have to have certain life experiences or have certain seats at the table to understand what that looks like and be able to say, okay, I understand. I might have not gone through it myself, but I understand that. And there's all those little things throughout the day where I go, I've been successful today, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it starts when we talk about being like a kangaroo, moving forward, all these different things is like, have you felt successful today? Have you at least moved the needle in some way in a positive direction, in that forward direction, at least a little bit, right? That one bit. And then overall for me, achieving success now, because again, it should change. We all change. If you asked me many years ago when I worked in pro sports, everyone thought I achieved success. I thought I'd be in that forever. And then I pivoted to supply chain. Once I got into supply chain and went directly into working for Lockheed Martin, I was like, this was the company I want to work for. This is where I'm going to sit. I've got it. This is where the rest of my career is going to lay. And then I changed. My mindset changed. The way I want to provide impact changed. And now I'm in this motion. But today it really looks like, how can I use my voice and help others in the podcast space ultimately? Because the podcast space is such a community. It's such a way to give back. It's such a way to help with branding. If you're trying to build a personal brand, professional brand, help share your knowledge in an industry. There's so many things you could do. All you have to do is take that first step. And then when it comes to, that angle that you mentioned, it's it's in order to achieve success, you are right, you need landmarks. You need to become the victor in certain battles. I use that analysis in my TED talk that I did, which is called Defeating Your Biggest Enemy, You, and how we can all become our biggest enemies in moments of struggle or opportunity. And it's all about identifying what battle you're in and how you need to become the victor in that battle to then move you forward and achieve your goals. And so my battle, I would say now, is making sure people understand and are given the right information when it comes to podcasting and how they could use their voice, and knowing they can use their voice, because there's so much information out there. And like, let's cut through the noise and make that first step. And as long as I achieve that, then we're good.
So my two boys are one is 31, almost 32, and the other one's 29. Will be 30 this year. I think that's right. Don't kill me if I missed it. I think I got it right. When they were younger and they could start to comprehend about what their future needed to look like, I used to tell them, if you don't do anything, make a positive difference every day in one small or big way. If you can just do that, you're moving forward. So I hear some of that in what you're talking about. Talk to me a little bit about your clients. And you talked a little bit about the military piece. We'll probably get back to that because that bleeds into a little bit of my passion with the veteran transition thing. But I'm going to make an assumption here. I hate assumptions, but I'm going to make an assumption just for the point of having a conversation. I would assume that the majority of your clients, people that come to you, don't even know how to define success. So at some point in time, you have to have this conversation of how do you even look at something and define success? Because some people will just tell you, well, I want to make $1 million, or I want $1 million, or I want my podcast to be like Joe Rogan, or whatever it is. And you have to back them up, right? Because you got to say incremental. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Oh, that happens to me on a daily basis. It's something where I make a joke. If I don't hear it in a day, did I really have conversations that day? Because I hear what's my return on investment by starting a podcast? I want to make that $1 million. How do I get there? How have you gotten there? This and that. And I do a lot of uh, mentorship and consulting in different areas, depending on the needs of the client. And the very first thing I will do, even on a call to see if they want to hire me and I want to bring them on as a client, for example, in the podcasting space. And I even had this conversation today when it started to come up about money in general and success. I was like, if you think that I'm going to give you an ROI today on how much your podcast can make, and it hasn't even come to fruition, you're dead wrong. And I'm like, and if you think you're going to make millions of dollars from your podcast, you're dead wrong, right? If you think sponsorship, and a lot of times too, it's again identifying what success looks like. So in the podcast space, for example, when we talk about achieving success within a podcast, people think of two buckets: sponsorships and money from listening to a podcast. Now, I throw both of those out the windows. Well, at least one of them out the window very quickly. And I use my podcast as a pure example. It became a top 10% most listened to podcast globally within 18 weeks. That was when I was comfortable on starting to say, okay, I could get sponsors now. A lot of my peers, when you're globally ranked, are getting sponsors. And I was told, hey, just wait till you get to that point and then like world's your oyster. You can charge what you want, this and that. And so I followed that path. And very quickly, what I realized is everyone wanted the highest package, which was great for my bank account, but they were going to change the feel of the show. People listened to the podcast because they liked the feel. I got to where I was so quickly because they liked it. Now, if I started changing that because I was going to get money, and the people who were going to pay wanted a guest spot on my show, but they wanted to be able to hard sell, well, now that it's going to start to go backwards. Now listeners are going to start to drop. All these things were going to happen. And I saw the writing on the wall. And I very quickly understood that I was making money from my podcast. It just didn't look at those two buckets. Now I was making pennies on the dollar for listenership, but I was also getting clients from them hearing my podcast, referrals from other guests who have been on my podcast, all these things. So going back to what I like, my whole point here is like, that is a very much a relevant conversation I have with every prospective client I look at taking on who wants to start or grow their podcast is, what do you identify success when it comes to monetization? And are you really looking at all the avenues? Because in reality, the biggest chunk that you will get long-term monetization wise from your podcast, and the easiest thing you can do, is build a good content, evergreen content, have good impactful conversations, and have the conversations with the right people, whether that is as guests, is that making it easy for someone who listens to your podcast to click and get to you via email, your website, things like that. It's all those little things, whereas you could be making thousands of dollars off your podcast because business is coming into your other business area.
So most people, when they start, especially if they use podcasting around their business, I mean, the Kangaroo podcast is here so that I can give people like you an opportunity to give viewpoints and personal experiences. And, you've got professional sports and Lockheed Martin, which both of those, especially Lockheed, I can really relate to. You have these things, right? And then you get into where you're at. So you've got some foundational things. Most people, when they're highly motivated and they're moving forward, they want to win. So, and you've been in professional sports and you've been in defense. You're around a lot of people that define winning, what that looks like. So in a football game, we define winning by having more points than the other team at the end of four quarters. We don't care. We don't care if we had more penalties. We don't care if we threw one more interception. As long as we have more points, we won, right? Explain to us maybe some pitfalls that you see with how people define winning, because winning is kind of success, how people define winning, and then some roadblocks that they may run into, things that you've had to help people through.
So for me, I want to answer this in two prongs. So for me, one thing I do is I'm very goals, process, procedure oriented, right? And then it's people who serve in the military very much, or have served in the military, very much get that. And I'm like, I've never served. I do have a spouse who serves. So and is a chief in the U.S. Coast Guard. So when we met, he was like, "Oh, you get it." I'm like, "Yeah, I've run on like making sure processes are in place, procedures are being followed." Like my brain goes towards that. So when I continuously try to grow or like decide to do something, it's, what's the timeline I can implement this in? How much time can I actually implement it within that day? So is it something, for example, that needs a week to be taken care of? I could do it a week straight and needs 14 hours, so I could block off 2 hours a day. Is that realistic? What are those things being measured? And then can I realistically do it to get to that end goal? And do I even have all the tools needed to do that? Or are there things I need to do in the beginning in order to do that? Now, that goes into the question you were asking me, is when we talk about winning, and I'm going to use the term victor here, and whatever you're doing, where the biggest pitfalls happen is two ideations. One, they don't identify a clear goal and align the processes that they need to get there. What is step one? What is step two? What's step three? What's my timeline? And then I'm not saying you need a detailed, like minute by minute thing of a task you're going to do in that time, or like how long it would take, but you need to have a general outline and understanding of what is needed to get from point A to point B. The second thing is they don't have that timeline and they don't have a clear enough goal. So they go, like you said earlier, I want to make that $1 million. I want to be able to retire at a certain pay grade. I want to be able to do X, whatever it is. But it's like, okay, well, what can you do in the next 3 months to get you to that spot? Do you want to, I'm going to use U.S. Coast Guard terms here for the military. Do you want to retire at an E5? Which is okay. Do you want to retire at an E7? Do you want to be able to get to an E9, right? All of those things are advancements. Different pay grades, different responsibility, different needs. Now, not everyone wants to get to an E9. Some people want to stay at like that non-rate lower level because they don't want to be a leader. That is okay. You need to identify that in order to say, when I retire, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. Because in each one of those buckets, your the amount of money, the amount of freedom, the amount of responsibility in real time is very different. So what do you want your life to look like? So we identify that first. And so I think a lot of times we're so used to looking at the big picture, we forget the importance of looking at that first and then scaling it down.
So talk to me about scale, because I really think that there's so much anxiety with success. And I will admit that I've made these same mistakes myself. If you're a strategic thinker, or you hire a strategic thinker, and so you want to work off the main goal, whatever that is, that could be, I mean, if you look at what's going on nationally, we have some goals and they're big, and it's going to take a long time to get from point A to point B, right? Or point A to point Z. There's a B, C, D, E, F, all that in there. Talk to me about scale and tell people why it's okay to have a small goal that has success defined around it and a large goal that has success defined around it, even if they don't look similar, but one feeds the other. Because this is the key, and I'm going to throw some stuff in here. Folks, what she's getting ready to tell you is the key to your emotional and physical and mental stability as you take this on, because this is not easy. Mm-hmm. None of this is easy. Having an idea is one thing. Three-dimensionalizing the idea is the tough part. So you have to take care of yourself along the way or you'll burn out.
Exactly. And so the very first thing I always say is identify that goal on a big scale and then break it down into smaller goals you could do. So if you know something, you might not even honestly have the end date in mind for that big goal you have, right? I want to grow and like take the business to the next level. And I'm going to do that by offering this new product. Well, and you might have a number in line, but you don't know whether it's going to take 6 months or a year for it to be able to be scaled to a point where that product is servicing all the people you want to be servicing, right? So it's okay not to have that big goal or have it fully polished when you begin. Then we go into the smaller goals. When it comes to the smaller goals as well, I say you should be telling people both goals. That's a big thing, right? Well, a lot of times we're fearful, we're not sure, we don't know how it's going to pan out, so we're scared to tell people. And that is one of the biggest things that can hold you back in actually the follow through, because if no one knows it's happening and it doesn't happen, where's your accountability? No one will know I failed at this. Whereas if you make the promise and you then go and tell other people, like, this is what we're going to be doing, again, even if you don't have the timeline, now you're saying it more and you can become more confident in it, and all these other things go into play when that starts to happen.
I'm gonna interrupt you real quick because I don't want to lose the thought.
Okay.
You said something there that's very important. You said keep the promise. Explain that.
So for me, keeping the promise means when I've set that goal, I'm following through on that. That is a promise to myself. That is a promise to my team. That is a promise to my family. Like, we're doing this. Now, I also say in that every decision you make, you have to, at the end of the day, be able to lay your head down on the pillow. So when you make that promise to yourself, whatever comes with it, bad, good, indifferent, you'll be able to say, you know what, I made the decision to move forward on this. I'm keeping my promise. I'm going to keep pushing through. Because a lot of times when that starts to happen, we give up on the promise. Now, the other aspect of that is saying, and I'm very much the person that does this, is like, I'm diving in. So when I set that promise, it's like, okay, let's implement it, let's do it, and let's see the results. And again, it goes back to saying, okay, good, bad, or indifferent, this is the path I've decided to move forward on, and we're going to move forward on it. And it's that promise to yourself to not only move forward on it, but 5-10 years from now, are you going to regret the decision of not moving forward on it, of not keeping your promise? And all those aspects are so important. I joke, but it's very much true on how I've made my decisions throughout my life. If I will regret it, maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, then I can't move forward on that path. I need to know I will be able to stand tall in the decisions I make, even if they don't pan out the way I want. And there's definitely been decisions out there that I've made for my business, for career moves I've had in the past, where people are like, that's not the right thing. And I'm like, no, I'm leaning into this. If it doesn't pan out the way I think it's going to pan out, then I'll go with it. And like, I will be okay with that. But you need to be able to sit with yourself in the silence at the end of the day.
So I love this. I love this because we're getting beyond the process and the checklist, right? Because there's two things here, right? Because you got to overcome the payment fear and you got to drive through things, but you can't drive through things at the expense of you.
Exactly.
And so it has to be somewhat natural. Number one, and number two is we make a lot of promises. I promise to get my kids through college. I promise to finish my education. I promise to start a podcast. We make promises, right? And these all compete. So if one is keeping you from fulfilling the promise of another, then you have to have a priority. And so something that I have done is I kind of set dates and I say, if by this time I'm not here, then I need to reevaluate.
And that's the thing I even do, and I think we all should do personally and professionally, right? Achieving success does not just mean professional success.
Right.
It very much also means personal success. And there's times I set goals, I set my mind to something, and it can be like a very short runway. People say sometimes it's my superpower. I very much do that to myself. I will make sure it gets done. I have 2 businesses, the Achieving Success, and then I started an apparel company in 2024 to give back to the U.S. Coast Guard. And there's custom pieces that I work with different stations and units within the U.S. Coast Guard to do. And then there's products people could buy to support the Coast Guard. And both of my businesses, from the day I decided I'm going to lean into this, see if it's worth doing and like now's the right time, to launch date, both of them has been 2 months. So I decided on September 14th, 2022 to look more into podcasting. Had a few calls that day with leaders in the industry, a podcast host, podcast producer, editor, like people, and just to learn about it. By the end of the day, I was like, okay, we're going to start this. And in going through that, I also decided to launch my business. I was still working at Lockheed at the time. November 1st, 2022. Business launched, podcast launched. I decided October 9th, 2024, that, I'd had this idea to start an apparel company because I had the information. I have a supply chain background. I have all these things. I have this deep understanding for apparel and promotional products. And I can use that to help represent the U.S. Coast Guard, that knowledge. And I'd been shooting it out for a while, my boyfriend was like, you're growing your business, in the consulting space, this and that. I don't know if it's the right deal. And I finally was just like, it's going back to that mindset of, okay, am I going to be able to sleep? And I was just getting to a point, even though I was so busy, I'd literally 2 days earlier come back from a 30-day travel for speaking and different engagements where I was in 6 different time zones, 3 different countries in 30 days. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, it just keeps popping in my head. I think I got to go with it. Called up someone, had a deep conversation who's in the industry, deals with manufacturers, all this stuff. Gave my idea. We went back and forth for 2 hours and I went down and his people in his actual command were actually at our house. And I went down there and I said, this is the conversation I just had. And I'm like, oh, buying from all of them, like, yeah, this will work. And my boyfriend was like, I'm going to support you on this because you've come up with a way where it's not going to, potentially take away time from like what you're doing with achieving success and what you've been growing for the past almost 3 years. That was October 9th. December 1st, 2024, I launched the business. So I say that because I tend to like decide to make a decision and we're going full throttle. But in that, whether it's starting a business or it's having that promise, that goal, and those leading up benchmarks of what you need to achieve, there's very much times where I'm getting stressed. I'm at home. You need someone that will say, hey, I think you need to take that break. Mentally, physically, you need to be able to say, if you're deciding to work through a weekend, like, okay, if it's nice out, I need to be able to go spend 2 hours outside. So I don't go 14 days where I haven't left the house potentially besides to run an errand. You need to be able to build in, and I use that word very strategically, build in time to your calendar for mental care and self-care. And that might look different to everyone. And I say that because it's very much true. What you deem self-care might look different to me. What you deem fun might not be the same to me. But you know what that is. And just making time and being present in that time. So I try to make a very conscious effort that in my workday, because I do have a few organizations I volunteer for and sit on boards for, that in a month there will only be 5 nights where I am working at night and doing calls into the night. And so like I have made a very conscious decision in the past year to go, I'd say almost 2 years now, to say, okay, I'm not going to work every night, Monday through Friday. I made a conscious decision to say, okay, can I try taking Fridays off? Now, obviously, things are going to pop up. I might need to work an hour or two, but can I say no meetings on Fridays? Can I say, because before we were stationed where we're stationed now, we lived closer to my parents. My mom did not work on Friday. So then I could be present and do things with her. Where we're stationed now, my boyfriend, most of the time, has Fridays off. So then can we do stuff, be able to relax, have our weekend? So there's those little things that it's not like you have to go out and go on vacation or do this or do that. But when you want to achieve goals, you also need to make sure you're building in that other time.
So my second book talks about quitting. Good quitting, bad quitting, and quitting when you have to. When is it okay to quit? Or is it okay to quit?
For me, and I'm going to speak on my behalf here on this, it's when I know I've tried my hardest to get the results. And quitting is the last resort. And I don't define it as quitting. I've defined it as I realized and gotten to the point, it is now time to pivot. Because it's not about you didn't win the race, you didn't win the end goal, you didn't do this. All the steps might have led you to where you need to go, but that end goal and what that looks like has changed. You might have come up with a great idea, and like and I'll use myself and podcasting as an example. I came up with this higher ticket package that does most of the work for you. I originally priced it at like, I think the original price included everything, editing, production, and it was mainly for higher ticket individuals who wanted a podcast or companies. And it was like $16,000 a month. And if you recorded in studio, I'd come out and do the recordings with you. Like, you have producers, you had everything. You only had to show up and sit and record for 30 minutes, right? And people in the industry were like, and the podcast level of like Ed Milet and all these people were like, this is fantastic. No one's doing this yet. The strategy, all these aspects. And what got me to that point was I started offering project-based, low-price items, and I built a very big network. And my services were flying off the table. But what I ended up realizing, right, and we talk about self-care and these other things, is my business was thriving at it. I was having, at one given time, 60 to 70 clients at once. But on top of those hours that I was spending on my client work and talking to my clients, every month a client would end. I need to get new clients. So I was sitting in calls all day trying to like get the buy-in every single month. And that was taking up so much time. And the feedback I was getting from hosts was like, your pricing is way too low for the value you bring. You can upcharge, do XYZ that I need help with and charge way more. And people in the industry were telling me the same thing. And at some point, it's always good to listen to what people are saying. So I took that and I listened to it. And I think I personally, conceptually, great idea. Money-wise, not great idea. Right? Like how much I was charging. So I went full throttle. I was confident in it. I had all the process and procedures already built out. I had a team, for producers and editors. People had built a network with or worked on my podcast. Had it all. It wasn't anything new we were implementing. What was new was what the package was going to look like and the type of individual he'd wanted. And I had a multi-million-dollar wealth manager reach out to me about podcasts. And I was like, bam, here we go. We're good, right? Gave him the price. And he was like, that was more expensive than I thought it would be. I'm thinking in my head, you got the money. So, like, why is this an issue? Right? Like, that price point is for you. Like, you can afford it, right? I'm not trying to rob someone who, does not have the funds or provide you something that does not have value. He very much understood the value, but he ended up saying no. And we've kept in touch, and he's a wonderful human. And I've ended up lowering the price. Now, the package itself, people love. What they couldn't wrap their head around was the money. And once I understood that side of things, it wasn't that I didn't win. It was that monetization wise, I needed to understand, I needed to make it a lower ticket. And now it's $3,500 to $5,500 a month, significantly less. And what that meant of how many clients I needed to sign to hit the yearly monetization that I wanted that package and the overall business to hit. And I was like, okay, that number is not significantly high. I can hit that. And now I'm actually going to get more people to be willing to spend this. So I'm going to spend less time going and trying to find those people. And all these things clicked. And so I pivoted. It wasn't a loss. It wasn't me saying I've given up, I've done anything else. I made that pivot, and very quickly my book was getting booked up with meetings who people were interested, and that $3,500 seemed way more doable than the other price point.
Sure. Why don't you tell us how to get a hold of you, and all the goodies that you want out there.
So you can find me by searching achieving-success.com. That is my website. You can also find me on LinkedIn by searching Olivia Atkin or Achieving Success LLC. We're also on Instagram at Achieving Success LLC. You could also find the podcast on any platform you listen to podcasts by searching Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. If you put in my name, if you're like, I can't fully remember these links or all these different stuff, if you put in Achieving Success or Olivia Atkin or both, I'm the first 5 pages of Google. So you're going to find everything you need to find in any link you want. But you can also email me at olivia.atkin@achieving-success.com. I personally answer every email, every message that comes through. It might take me up to 72 hours. I say, you got to give me that grace period, but I will personally answer everything.
You bet. So let's close with this. I want you to give people out there that maybe don't have this rock solid foundation. Their self-confidence might be a little shaken. They're full of the fear and pain that hold us back from doing the things that we kind of imagine. Can you give us some words of wisdom? And if it's not even about that, just give us something to leave with so that we can have a nugget, because I believe in nuggets.
Yeah. It all starts with making a promise and taking the first step. All you have to do is make the promise and take the first step. Let all the other noise wash away. Just do that. Just start there, because you have to start somewhere.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I told you before we started, I said, usually you end up naming your podcast. And so it's probably going to be, keep your promise and to achieve success. So that's absolutely awesome. So Olivia, it's been a blessing having you. There's a lot there. I hope people get through that, especially people that have a passion about podcasting or just a passion about how to make a promise, believe in themselves, and then take that first step, because once that happens, it is kind of magical. So I love it. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Ladies and gentlemen, another kangaroo on the podcast. Moving forward, achieving success.